Thanksgiving used to be my thing. I'd roast the turkey, decorate the house, even write little notes for everyone at the table. Then, 3 days before this year's dinner, my sister texted, "We don't want you at Thanksgiving. No explanation, no apology, just exile." You'd think I cried. I didn't. I went silent. But silence isn't surrender, it's strategy. Because while they lit candles at their perfect little table, I served a feast with the mayor, a film crew, and 50 strangers who'd been told they didn't belong. This isn't revenge, it's revelation. And the part that shocked them most? I never raised my voice, I just raised the bar. I was halfway through tying the gold ribbon on a jar of homemade cranberry sauce when my phone buzzed. It was from my sister. "We don't want you at Thanksgiving this year." Just like that. No emojis, no explanation, just erasure. I stared at the screen for a full minute, thinking maybe it was a typo, a cruel prank, or a message meant for someone else. But no, it was clear, deliberate, final. I didn't scream. I didn't even cry. Instead, I placed the jar on the counter, smoothed the ribbon like it still mattered, and sat in silence. That was my thing, you know? Thanksgiving. I'd been hosting, cooking, gifting for the last 10 years. I'd paid for the turkey. I'd ironed the napkins. I'd made place cards with little acorns and their names in gold ink. All I'd ever wanted was to keep us together. Now they didn't even want me at the table I built. What had I done? I scrolled back through old texts, searching for clues like a forensic investigator of family failure. Nothing. No fights. No drama. Just a slow fade. Like someone dimming the lights on my existence, one holiday at a time. Have you ever been quietly deleted from something you created? I put the phone down and walked to the fridge to store the last pie. When I opened the door, there it was, on the bottom shelf, pushed behind a container of expired pesto. The tin foil-wrapped leftovers my sister had given me after last year's dinner. I hadn't thrown it away. Some mix of guilt, apathy, and emotional paralysis had let it sit there for 12 months. I unwrapped it on impulse, expecting mold and regret, but instead, nestled between 2 crusty wedges of pie, was a folded piece of paper. Oil-stained, yellowed, familiar. I knew what it was before I opened it. My own handwriting, the loops of a younger me. It was the letter I wrote to my mother when I was 18. A clumsy, desperate apology for taking the car without asking, for staying out past curfew, for not being the daughter she wanted. I had slipped it under her door that night, heart pounding. I never heard back. Apparently, she hadn't just read it, she'd saved it, and stuffed it in a box of pie where my sister could read it aloud during dessert like some twisted party favor. I could almost hear the laughter, the mocking voices wrapped in familial love. Remember this? Amanda begging for approval? I didn't feel anger, not the loud kind. I felt a clarity that cut deeper. I whispered, "They never throw anything away, except me." I put the letter back inside the box, resealed it, and tossed it in the trash. Then I stood there, letting the hum of the refrigerator be the only sound. My hands trembled, not with rage, but with release. The world had shifted slightly off its axis, but for once, I wasn't spinning with it. Later that day, I walked to the corner cafe, the one with the chipped ceramic mugs, and the barista who played jazz like it was a love language. I needed space, air, distance from the ghosts in my kitchen. I took my usual seat near the window, ordered a black coffee, and stared at people passing by, couples, shoppers, families. That's when I saw her, Mara, She used to live in a tent under the overpass until we met 2 Thanksgivings ago. I'd brought her a plate of food, no sermon, just stuffing and grace. She'd cried, I'd cried, and then we never really said goodbye. Now she was clean, smiling, and radiant in a thrifted pea coat. She spotted me and came in like we were lifelong friends. "Are you hosting again this year?" she asked, eyes hopeful, clutching her cup of peppermint tea. I blinked. Hosting? My voice cracked, fragile in the echo of my own exile. "Yes," she said. "That dinner you did, it made us feel like people again." I swallowed hard. My hands warmed around the coffee mug, and then I smiled, not because I had an answer, but because I realized I had a reason. "Yes," I said, voice steady. "Just not the one they think." I hadn't opened the family photo album in years. It was buried beneath holiday decor, pressed between a dusty wreath and boxes of lights that hadn't seen daylight since before the pandemic. But something compelled me to pull it out that afternoon. Maybe I needed proof I belonged once. Maybe I wanted to remember when it didn't hurt. Page after page, there I was, sort of. In most photos, I was in the background, half-turned, setting a dish on the table, wiping a smudge off someone else's face, or standing just outside the frame, captured mid-task. The spotlight was always on someone else, my sister beaming with a wine glass, my mother slicing turkey like royalty. I was the movement, not the moment. One photo stopped me cold. Thanksgiving 5 years ago. Everyone at the table was laughing, glasses raised. And me? I was in the kitchen doorway, holding a gravy boat, mid-step, not quite in or out. A ghost with a job. I remembered how that gravy boat slipped from my hands a few minutes later. No one noticed. I cleaned it alone. I flipped the page and a sticky note fell out. It had my mother's handwriting. I recognized it from every note she'd left me growing up. Lists, chores, reminders of where I failed. This one read, "Amanda reminds me more of a maid than a daughter." A chill ran down my spine. There was no date, but it didn't matter. I knew she'd said it. She probably meant it. That sentence didn't shout. It whispered. And somehow that hurt more. A million little wounds, paper cuts from words, never screamed, but always meant. I picked up my phone and called her. She answered on the second ring. Her voice clipped and rehearsed. "What is it, Amanda?" I took a breath. "Nothing urgent. I just wanted to say, I hope you have a peaceful Thanksgiving." A pause, then, "Is that all?" I nodded, though she couldn't see me. "Yes, that's all. I think this will be the last one I acknowledge." Another pause. "If that's what you want." I hung up. No thank you, no hesitation. Just closure, sealed and done. Still holding the phone, I sat down at my laptop. The cursor blinked on an empty email draft. My fingers moved before I had a plan, typing out a subject line, "Proposal for Thanksgiving Community Feast." I didn't know exactly what it would become, but it would be mine, and no one could delete me from it. By the next morning, I was at Lucy's apartment. We spread notebooks, flyers, and old menus across her dining table. She didn't ask why we were doing this. She knew. She'd seen my face after the phone call. She'd been there the year I cried. In the bathroom while everyone toasted my sister's promotion. That was actually just a title change. "This time," I said, "we feed the people who've never had a seat." Lucy grinned. "You mean the outsiders?" "No," I replied. "The overlooked." We made calls to shelters, queer youth centers, senior homes. The idea spread faster than we expected. People said yes, not just the hungry, Volunteers, donors, vendors, people who knew what it felt like to be invisible. And then, the mayor's office called. At first, I thought it was a prank, but no. He had heard of last year's event through a social media post. He asked if he could meet in person. We met at a quiet cafe, the same place where Mara had found me. He was warm but careful, his words measured like a man used to performance. Then, as we sipped coffee, he shared his story. Abandoned by his father every Thanksgiving until he turned 16. I always pretended I didn't care, he said, but I do. I still do. He didn't offer pity. He offered a platform. What if, he said, we did this big, broadcast it, let people see the real meaning of Thanksgiving? I paused, caught in the weight of it. Was this revenge? Some part of me wanted it to be. A public spectacle, a reckoning. But deeper than that, I felt something quieter, a restoration, not of reputation, of self. I'm not doing this to show them, I said. I'm doing this to finally see myself. The mayor nodded once, like he understood. Maybe he did. That night, I stood in my kitchen alone, trying out recipes for the feast. My hands moved automatically, but my eyes burned. I wasn't crying because I was hurt. I was crying because, for the first time, I wasn't. The room was silent except for the simmer of soup on the stove. I tasted it, nodded, and turned down the heat. Then I sat at the table, just me and the food. It was enough. I was enough. Lucy burst through the door, a bag of tablecloths in hand. You need to see this, she said, flipping on the TV. There, on screen, was my sister. Her hair perfectly curled, her voice sweet as icing. She was live streaming their family dinner. She called it our legacy feast. She smiled at the camera and said, "This year we're doing things a little more exclusive." I didn't flinch, I didn't break. I just turned off the TV. I began to collect the pieces, not out of vengeance, but because the truth deserved to be organized, like a song with no skips. Late at night, in the soft blue glow of my laptop, I downloaded every voice message, every text thread, every passive-aggressive note that had once made my stomach twist. I labeled them carefully. November 2019, guilt trip, birthday 2021, silent treatment. I wasn't archiving pain. I was preserving evidence. Some were laughable in hindsight. My mother's voice, soft but sharp, saying, "If you'd just been more grateful, your sister wouldn't feel threatened." Or my sister texting, "You act like you're better than us just because you donate to strangers." I listened without flinching. Not because I was numb, but because I was awake. Then came the finances. I printed out every bank statement from the past 3 years. Line by line, I traced the slow siphoning of my savings. Donations made in my name, purchases I never saw, shared accounts quietly drained. The number hit me like a silent bomb. Over $50,000 gone. I slid the file across the table to a lawyer friend over lunch. He didn't blink. "You have a case," he said. "This is financial abuse." I shook my head. "I don't want courtrooms or headlines. I just want a firewall." He nodded. "Then we'll build you one." 2 days later, I received an email from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line simply read, "You need to see this." I almost deleted it, but something stopped me. The message was from my mother's younger sister, Aunt Rachel, a woman I hadn't spoken to in years. Attached was a video, grainy but clear. My mother sat in her garden, wine glass in hand, telling Rachel, "Of course I'll split the estate evenly. Amanda's done more for this family than anyone." She laughed. "But she doesn't need to know that yet. Let her think she's earning it." I didn't cry. I saved the file to an encrypted folder. I didn't need to use it against her. I just needed to know I wasn't crazy. 2 days after that, the mayor called again. "We'd be honored," he said, "if you'd speak at the Thanksgiving event as the organizer. Your story, it's what the city needs." My instinct was to say no. I wasn't a symbol. I was a woman with a broken fridge and a heart that still stung when she passed the pie aisle. But I remembered Mara's question in the cafe. I remembered the faces of the kids who'd RSVP'd to the community dinner. And I said yes. Planning the meal became a meditation, each dish a memory with new meaning. The turkey replaced. I made sweet potato soup, creamy and warm, the way my grandmother, my father's mother, used to make it. She was the only one who ever held me when I cried, whispering, "You don't have to earn love, sweetheart." I designed the menu like a love letter to the forgotten. No performative sides, just real, nourishing food that wrapped around your bones and whispered, "You are seen." Volunteers poured in. One afternoon, as I folded napkins, a familiar voice called out, "Need a hand?" I turned and froze. It was Eli. We hadn't spoken in over a decade. In high school, he was my lab partner and the only person brave enough to come out. My sister and her friends had made his life miserable. He'd disappeared after graduation. Now he stood in my doorway, older, taller, and somehow brighter. "I heard what you're doing," he said, "and I wanted in." We worked side by side for hours, no need to explain, no need to revisit, just two people reclaiming space. That night, as the city buzzed with anticipation and shopping bags rustled like dry leaves, I sat at the long wooden table we'd borrowed from a church basement. It was bare, except for the candles. I lit them one by one, then sat down with Mara, Eli, Lucy, and a dozen others. We didn't talk about the families we'd lost. We talked about music. About the first time we rode a bike. About who made the best cornbread. We laughed until the room was full. And for the first time in years, I felt what I'd spent a lifetime searching for. Home. Later that night, as I scrolled through my phone before bed, a notification popped up. A blogger I vaguely recognized had posted, "I'm skipping my family feast to attend Amanda's." Underneath, hundreds of comments, people sharing stories, people saying, "Me too." I didn't reply, I didn't repost. I just turned off the phone and let the quiet wrap around me like a blanket I didn't have to fold for anyone else. The sun was barely breaking through the overcast sky as I stood behind the makeshift stage, nothing more than a wooden platform set up in the middle of Rosewood Park. Folding chairs lined the lawn, filled with people wrapped in scarves, holding warm cups of cider. Some smiled, some looked skeptical. Most just looked like they hadn't been smiled at in a long time. The press vans had arrived early. Microphones bobbed in the front row, angled like flowers tilting toward light. A camera drone hovered above, its hum oddly soothing. I adjusted the collar of my coat, glanced at Lucy, who gave me a small, anchoring nod, and stepped forward. I wasn't nervous. I was clear. "Good afternoon," I began. "Thank you for showing up. That alone makes you different than most." Soft laughter, a few claps. I took a breath. "I'm not here to talk about family, not because it doesn't matter, but because it's not the point. Today is about presence, the radical act of being seen. Some of us grew up learning to earn our place at the table. Some of us never got the invite, not because we were wrong, but because we were right too soon." A ripple moved through the crowd. Phones lifted, live streams launched. I could feel it, the shift. That line had cracked something open. "There's no RSVP to worthiness," I said. "You're already enough. And this table, this feast, is for anyone who's ever been asked to sit in the kitchen, stand in the corner, or make room for someone who never made room for you." Applause this time, louder, honest. Behind the cameras, I caught sight of Mara, standing next to Eli, both wiping their eyes. I didn't mention my mother, or my sister, or the voicemail that had arrived an hour earlier, calling me manipulative and attention-seeking. I didn't need to. The point wasn't them. The point was that I was still standing, and I wasn't standing alone. Later, someone clipped the speech into a 30-second video. It ended with me saying some of us were never invited, not because we were wrong, but because we were right too soon. It exploded online. Comments poured in. "This is my story. I needed this today. Why am I crying in my car?" But with visibility comes scrutiny. Within hours, strangers began digging through my family's public profiles. Archived holiday posts, old tweets from my sister mocking oversensitive millennials. A video from 2 years ago showing my mother laughing when someone joked, "Amanda's not family, she's staff." The internet didn't forget, and suddenly neither did anyone else. The next morning, my mother posted on her Facebook, "This entire stunt is a fabrication. Amanda is just trying to make herself famous." But she didn't know someone else had uploaded a video of their own. Footage from the night I was admitted to the ER for an allergic reaction. My mother yelling at the nurse, "She's exaggerating, just give her water. She's dramatic like that." The nurse had recorded it as part of a formal report. A friend who'd seen it shared it anonymously. I didn't respond. I didn't post a rebuttal or write a counter-narrative. I simply kept moving. Because the truth doesn't need defending, it just needs daylight. That week, I received an invitation from the mayor's office. They wanted me to join the advisory board on community healing and social inclusion. I stared at the email for a long time, rereading the words. "We believe your experience gives you a perspective this city needs." Not long after, I returned to Rosewood Park. The table was still there, now surrounded by children playing tag around its edges. It had become something else entirely. A gathering place, a landmark of gentleness. A little girl tugged at my coat as I watched the kids. "Are you the lady who made the feast?" she asked, tilting her head. I knelt beside her. "No, sweetheart," I said with a smile. "I'm just someone who doesn't sit alone anymore." She nodded, satisfied, and ran off laughing. As I stood to leave, a man in a dark coat approached. Mid-30s, camera bag slung over one shoulder. He handed me a business card. His name was Daniel, and beneath it, the words, "Documentary filmmaker, stories of survival and strength." "I've been following your story," he said gently. "I'm working on a film about people rebuilding after personal betrayal. But not with revenge, with resilience. You're the first person I thought of." I took the card, unsure what to say, not because I didn't believe him, but because, for the first time in a long time, someone saw my survival, not as spectacle, but as substance. I slipped the card into my coat pocket, the weight of it small but real. The table had witnessed it all. Now the world would too. It started quietly, the way most collapses do. One article, then two. A few anonymous tips, then a subpoena. My mother, the woman who once demanded receipts for every dime I spent as a teenager, was now under investigation for financial misconduct, charity donations that never reached the charities, accounts opened in my name, signatures that didn't quite match. The local paper published a piece with the headline, "Matriarch or Manipulator, Inside the Family Finances of the Monroe Legacy." She didn't respond publicly, but her silence spoke louder than her denial ever could have. My sister fared no better. A brand she was supposed to represent, a startup with a family values campaign, dropped her within 48 hours of the Thanksgiving livestream going viral. Old tweets resurfaced, jokes she made at the expense of people who looked, loved, or lived differently, screenshots, hashtags, a petition. She went offline. I didn't clap, I didn't post, I didn't even feel satisfaction, just a strange, settled stillness, like watching a sandcastle dissolve after the tide comes in. The family thread fell apart. Group chats silenced. Cousins took sides. Old photos were deleted. Everyone blamed everyone else. But I stayed out of it, like a woman standing on the shore of a burning ship, grateful to be dry but aware of the smoke. Meanwhile, something new was growing where the pain had been. What started as a single dinner turned into a weekly gathering. People showed up with casseroles and rice dishes, pies that told stories. There was no agenda, just a long table, folding chairs, and permission to be real. We called it the second table. Every week, someone new shared a recipe and a memory. A widower talked about his wife's lemon bars. A teenage girl baked muffins using ingredients she used to steal from her mother's pantry because she wasn't allowed to cook. It was messy, beautiful, alive. One night, I arrived early to set the table and found a note taped to the community center door. A journalist had written a piece that read, "Thanksgiving was broken. Amanda fixed it." I smiled and folded it gently into my pocket. I didn't need the credit, but it was nice to be seen. That week, an email arrived from someone I hadn't thought about in years, Rachel T., a girl from high school. She was the kind who had laughed at me too loud, too long whenever my sister made me the punchline. Her message was short. "Amanda, I watched your speech. I want to say I'm sorry for laughing when it wasn't funny, for not stopping her when I should have. You didn't deserve it. None of it." I didn't reply, but I read it 3 times, then a 4th, and I believed her. Later that same day, another message came in, from my mother. "If you want to talk, I'll be here. I won't ask questions, I won't defend myself. I'll just be here." I stared at the blinking cursor, my fingers hovered. Then, slowly, I typed 1 sentence and pressed send. "If you mean that, send something to this place." Attached was a link to a small nonprofit named after my grandmother, the woman who'd once told me I didn't have to earn love. Nothing more, no confrontation, just a direction. Then I closed my laptop, brewed a cup of chamomile tea, and curled into the corner of the couch with a worn copy of The Secret Garden. The house was quiet, the windows fogged with early winter. I turned each page slowly, not for the story, but for the peace in not needing to be anywhere else. That evening, as the last light slipped through the curtains, Lucy knocked and peeked in with her usual half grin. "There's someone at the door," she said, her voice playful. "Tell them to come back tomorrow," I muttered, still half lost in the garden, with Mary Lennox and her stubborn magic. "You might want to see this," Lucy added. "They're not alone." I stood, curious, and followed her to the porch. Outside, standing in a neat row, were 6 students, young, eager, holding clipboards and nervous smiles. One of them stepped forward, hands slightly shaking, and said, "We're starting a youth project on restorative justice and community rebuilding. We've been studying you, your story, your work. We were wondering—" He glanced back at the others for reassurance. "If you'd be willing to be our advisor. We want to build something that lasts." I blinked, heart full but steady. I looked at them, then at the sky, now painted in the soft pink of dusk. "Of course," I said. "Let's build a bigger table." We called it the second circle. Not a shelter, not a church, just a space. 4 walls, long tables, warm lights. It opened on the first Monday of spring in a renovated bookstore, with bookshelves lining the walls and a kitchen that always smelled like cinnamon. This was where the exiled came to build again. Each week I hosted workshops, not about revenge, not about cutting people off. We taught how to set emotional boundaries that didn't feel like barbed wire, how to track your bank account when love tries to control it, how to say no without apology and mean it. We talked about family, the kind that breaks you and the kind you find later, piece by piece. One evening, after a session on Emotional Gaslighting 101, a young woman waited as everyone filed out. She hovered by the door, hands clenched in the sleeves of an oversized hoodie. I recognized that look, the one that says I want to speak, but I'm not sure I'll be believed. She stepped closer and whispered, "You saved me." I blinked, unsure what she meant. She looked down, tears pooling at the edge of her voice. "My parents kicked me out last year after I told them I wanted to change careers. Said I was ungrateful, selfish, lazy. I thought maybe they were right, but then I watched your speech. I came to your feast, and I started believing I wasn't broken." I didn't hug her. I didn't need to. I just nodded, and we stood in silence for a long time. That silence said everything. We weren't fixing people. We were giving them tools to remember who they were before they were convinced they were too much or not enough. Thanksgiving came around again, quietly but powerfully. This time, I didn't organize the feast. They did. Volunteers from last year, kids from the second circle, new faces from cities I hadn't even visited. They planned it all: decor, recipes, the seating chart that wasn't a chart at all, but a pile of name tags and a sign. "Sit where you feel safe." I was told to show up at noon, no earlier. When I arrived at the park, I stopped breathing for a second. The table, if you could call it that, stretched across the entire green. Long wooden planks, mismatched chairs, candles floating in jars, laughter rising like steam. It was no longer just a meal. It was a declaration. People didn't stand up to give speeches. They just sat, passed food, and listened. It was loud with joy, heavy with healing, and beautifully ordinary. I wandered through the aisles of dishes, sweet potatoes, tagine, samosas, lasagna. Every plate had a story. Every laugh had a backstory. No one had to perform their pain here to be welcomed. Someone handed me a medal, an award from the city, pinned to my coat without ceremony. It shimmered under the pale sky, but I barely noticed it. What caught my eye was the girl from the workshop. She was laughing at something Eli had said, her eyes alive, her body relaxed. She looked like someone who had never been afraid of her own voice. I stepped away from the crowd and walked to the edge of the grass where the trees swayed like an old rhythm. From here, the table looked like a river, curving and infinite. I remembered the first time I sat alone on Thanksgiving, staring at a full fridge and an empty phone, and I smiled, because now no one sat alone, not unless they chose to. I didn't need a speech. I didn't need the mic. I didn't even need a seat. This was never about me being seen. It was about making room for the unseen. I stood there, heart quiet, and thought, I used to believe they didn't want me, but maybe I was never meant to sit at their table. Maybe I was born to build the one they'd never let anyone else into.